but it is what it is. It's not going to change until they actually get out there on the field. Other teams around the National Football League, the two teams playing in the Hall of Fame game, have their entire camps in. Other teams have brought rookies in. The Philadelphia Eagles are tied for dead last in the league as to when they're actually going to get their camp underway, with everyone showing up next Tuesday. There's only a handful of teams like the Eagles who are waiting that long. How does this jive with Nick Sirianni's tenets of coaching? I saw your article on JAKIBSports.com about Nick Sirianni and his mindset and his own personal preparation for the season. How are you, Birds fans? It is another episode of Birds 365 Thursday edition with your Mac and Mac guys, McMullen and McDonald, here to hang with you for the next 2 hours. Countdown continues, Johnny Mac. Just 5 days until the Eagles report to camp. Day one, everybody just bro hugs and high fives and catches up on their summer activities before they'll ever actually get out there on the field. But before you know it, you will be getting grass time with the Philadelphia Eagles. And they're getting a little bit of a late start. And I know this is probably with our streamers and our guys who tune in every single day, guys and gals, I should say, getting to be old hat that yours truly complains about the fact that the Eagles have subscribed to this doing less pays more line of thinking in prepping for a season. But it is what it is. It's not going to change until they actually get out there on the field. Other teams around the National Football League, the two teams playing in the Hall of Fame game, have their entire camps in. Other teams have brought rookies in. The Philadelphia Eagles are tied for dead last in the league as to when they're actually going to get their camp underway, with everyone showing up next Tuesday. There's only a handful of teams like the Eagles who are waiting that long. How does this jive with Nick Sirianni's tenets of coaching? I saw your article on JAKIBSports.com about Nick Sirianni and his mindset and his own personal preparation for the season. Isn't work one of the things that should be one of Nick Sirianni?
Yeah, well, number one, it's interesting you go here to start the show, Jody, because I can't talk about it yet, and it won't be out for a while. But you're going to be more upset when the schedule is actually put out. And by schedule, I mean the training camp schedule. Yeah, it doesn't jive. I've been talking about this for months. And that's why, there's a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of fellow reporters about this, and they buy into it more than me. Some do, at least, that Nick is on board with all of this. I find it very hard to believe. From everything else he says, I find it very hard to believe that if it were up to Nick Sirianni, now there's a couple ways to frame that, obviously, but if it were just up to Nick Sirianni, the Eagles would be practicing more. Now, I'm not saying he's just outraged, because he's smart enough to know he doesn't have that kind of cachet to be outraged at this point of his career, which is still a very young career. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. So you can't have it both ways. You can't be saying Nick Sirianni's this competitive guy, and he is, by the way. That part of it's true. But he's also okay with this. It doesn't jive with me. It doesn't make sense. And that's what I've said from pretty much day one. And I'm not coming off that stance, because it's just common sense, really. No, if he were Andy Reid, if he were Bill Belichick, if he were that type of Pete Carroll type of coach, they'd be practicing more, period. End of sentence.
Doesn't seem to add up to me, but again, the Eagles first year under Nick Sirianni, and last year he surely wasn't coming in and dictating anything as far as schedules went behind the ears rookie, never been a head coach anywhere. He was going to do exactly as he was told. I can't knock or question or mock the coach for the way that the preparation for last season was done. It did for the most part, and we could really get into the weeds and break down every single missed practice and missed game for guys on the roster. But just in a very general sense, the Eagles were relatively healthy last year. Now, I think some of that has to do with luck. A big part of that has to do with luck. We'll see if it continues in the same direction, because if you had little luck going last year for your side, you would expect maybe the scales bounce a little bit and have a couple more injuries this year than not. But if they truly believe that not practicing, and it makes common sense that not practicing gives you less chance to get hurt, but it also, for me, gives you less chance to be prepared and ready for the start of a season. If they come back on the lesser side of the injuries again, yeah, then I'm just going to have to sit here and eat crow and quasi complain about the lack of work that the Eagles are actually putting in. But I don't think they're going to change. Even if Nick Sirianni has a winning season and the Eagles make the playoffs and win a playoff game, I don't think he's coming out and flexing his muscles going into next offseason. I think it's going to be more of the same, if not more of the more.
Yeah, I mean, until he gets that cachet I was talking about, until he gets to that point where he's got leverage, it's not going to change, even if there are a significant uptick in injuries. It'll help his argument. But I don't think it's about that for the Eagles. I think it's about the cost benefit of preparation, as you mentioned, versus health for week one. And the goal is to be as healthy as possible for week one, because you can't prepare anyway, like you used to, two-a-days and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I think the Eagles' debate is. Not that they found the cure-all for injuries. I mean, Tyree Jackson tore his ACL in week 18. Brett Toth tore his ACL in week 18. I don't believe they have the kind of hubris to say, no, we found the cure for injuries in the NFL. It's simply about, all right, well, we have this limited time. Even if we used every single minute with our good players that we do have, you still can't prepare like you used to. So why not get as many as those key players to week one as healthy as possible? I think that's their equation, more than, oh, we have we found the cure for injuries. I don't think the Eagles have that kind of hubris, although they might. But I think it's about getting to week one. Now, in season, and this really started under Doug Peterson, they kind of stumbled onto that late in the season, where they would scale back practices, and they basically wouldn't even have the full Wednesday practice, and they do a bunch of walkthroughs. I think that part of it is to save the legs of the veteran players. Remember, they've had a pretty old team since the Super Bowl, and they still do, at least with their key players. They're turning it over. They're getting a lot younger talent, but the Jason Kelce's of the world, the Lane Johnsons, and Fletcher Cox, now Brandon Graham, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The aging players, they've been an older team since they won the Super Bowl, and they said, let's try to run it back and win another one. And that's changing a little bit, but I do think that in-season scale back helps the older players keep their legs for what has been the stretch runs, except for 2020 when they were terrible.
Whatever the mindset is, whatever their philosophy is, whoever is contributing to this, Howie Roseman, medical staff, and kind of dictating terms to the coaching staff, their reasons for doing it are theirs, and they're not going to sit down and explain them to John McMullen or Jody McDonald or anybody else, nor is Coach Ciriani, because you got to believe he's privy to why they're doing it the way they're doing it, but he's not about to share with us why that is the case. My concerns are twofold. Number one is just general readiness for the team. They've made some significant additions this offseason. It's not like they bring back the same 53 guys from year to year. There's turnover every single year, and guys need to be incorporated into systems and work with teammates and get feels and the like. So I have a general concern that if you don't do enough, you're not as prepared as you can be. And maybe even more so, my biggest concern is there are a couple of positions, at least in my estimation, and I'm just Joe talk show host. I'm not the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles or the coach of any other team, as a matter of fact. But there are positions on this team where there should be some debate as to who is playing how much, who is quote unquote starting. That can be overstated, but playing at key junctures, in key games, on key downs. It's not like we know the Eagles starting 22 and then there's a drop off to all their backup players. There are a couple positions where there could be some debate as to who's going to play. John, when is the coaching staff going to figure out who should be playing in those positions, on those plays, in those games that are going to help to decide the Eagles season? Seeing as they don't put a whole hell of a lot of practice time in before the first game starts. All right, you play the first game, you break down the tape. All right, we got a bit of grasp now. But don't you want to get there having a better feel as to who actually should be out there on the field?
Browns and Miami joint practices. I mean, that's gonna be this whole training camp, and sadly, it's not even going to be in Philadelphia. Both
now,
are on the road.
I'll let you get to your point, and I apologize for interrupting, but let me just see if I got this straight. They're going to expect Eagle fans to show up at that preseason game, and they're going to charge for tickets, and they're going to charge for parking, and that game is going to be basically irrelevant, but those all-important joint practices in Berea, Ohio, and wherever the hell the Dolphins practice down south of South Beach, that's going to determine who's going to be playing the first game of the season against the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't play their starters last year. They're certainly not going to play them this year. And by that, I mean, some guys have to play because it becomes a numbers crunch, but very few reps. For significant reps, the starters are going to be in practices, those joint practices. And we saw it last year. I mean, they're not going to change from what they did last year. Now, for the back end of the roster guys, it's still very important for guys trying to make the football team. They'll get an opportunity with those in front of those ticket buyers. But that's always been an issue with the NFL. I mean, even when preseason games meant a little bit more, Jody, it was still price gouging. Everybody would bundle them around the league.
Oh, sure.
I'm sure there were some teams that didn't, but
32 for 32 do.
Yeah.
The last one that didn't, New York Jets.
Yeah. So
they finally had to give it up and go, yeah, the 31 other teams are doing this. Maybe we should do this too. So, yeah, you
have to.
Ticket package, you got to buy them all.
Yeah, once, people aren't going to buy them. I mean, why are they going to buy them, especially now? But if you like Britton Kobe and, you hope he wins the punt return job, he'll get a chance in that game. But even the guys who aren't projected to be starters right now, like the key reserves, like Jack Driscoll on the offensive line or Jaquiski Tart right now at safety, they're not going to get meaningful reps in the preseason games. It stinks, but it's not coming back. It's not going back to the way it used to be. So it's kind of, let's get through this and try to get to week 1 of the regular season.
And I get what you're saying, and I can sit here and scream and yell all I want, and they're not returning to 1995 getting ready for season motif. Not happening. I get that. Here's my only concern with the Eagles. Is it going to be as good as what the Washington Commanders, New York Giants, Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings, all the teams that are on the Eagles schedule getting ready for this year? And yes, I believe that early in the season, the more you get into the season, you play games, the preparation that you did back in September becomes less important. So it's those early season matchups and the teams you're going to be playing against twice during the year. Are they doing more? Are they going to be more prepped?
They're doing more. I feel comfortable saying they're doing more. And that's, Ricky and I were talking about. Ricky and Ricardo and I are kind of on the same page there. Not so much, from the Detroit perspective, look, I just think teams get fired up for their home openers, and that's natural. Um, Everybody's got hope, and when you play in a bad team in a home opener, that's probably the worst time you could play them. I mean, literally, the worst time, because they're going to be excited. They don't know how bad they are yet. All NFL teams have good players, including the Detroit Lions. How many good players are there on the Jets, Jody? There's a lot.
Handful.
There's a lot. No, seriously. I mean, they're all NFL players. And they can hurt you if you don't show up and play, your top level game. So I do think it's, the Eagles should win the game. I'm not trying to, but I do think the spot is a little bit tougher than you're playing the Lions when they played the Lions last year and they were 0-7 or whatever the heck they were. And they kind of realized the writing was on the wall. And then they had some injuries, and all of a sudden, that's where the Eagles season turns around. They completely bulldoze that team. I think it's more difficult. It's a more difficult spot than the last time they were in Detroit. There's, and then you talk about the preparation. Kevin O'Connell's a first-time rookie head coach. He's utilizing his time. Every piece of time, every OTA he utilized. Now, I don't know what kind of coach he's going to be. I have no idea. But he was given that rope to utilize the time he does have. Is that going to make a difference? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he's a bad coach. Maybe it's not going to make a difference. But he's trying to utilize the time. And he was given, more important to me, is he was given the opportunity. See, that's the important part to me, Jody. And Nick's not going to go on record and say that, but that's where we started the show. I do not believe he wouldn't use that time if he was allowed to use that time. I'm never going to believe that. You can't act like the most competitive person in the world and then walk away from competition. It doesn't make sense to me.
Here's where I disagree with both you and Ricky. You're comparing playing the Lions in Detroit week 1 as to potentially playing the Lions in Detroit week 14, where they might not be playing as well and guys might not be as motivated. I follow that line of reasoning, but it's kind of irrelevant because you have to play the teams you're scheduled to play over the course of the season. As soon as the season ends, the previous season ends, you know who you're playing and where you're playing them. The only thing you don't know is when you're playing them. If not the Detroit Lions, which of the other road games the Eagles are scheduled to play would you prefer the Eagles to be?
Oh, I didn't say there's a preference. I just say it's a more difficult spot than it would be. And
you got to play, Johnny. You got to play somebody opening week on the road. But would you rather play the Detroit Lions or someone else?
No, that's not the point. I agree with you. I mean, if that's not the worst team on your schedule, maybe you can argue Chicago in the same division because I think they're going to be a disaster. But that's not the point. Yeah, you should win. You should win. And they play Chicago later. I forget the week. You should win both of those games because you have more talent. I just mean there's more of a trap potential when you're playing one of those teams in week 1. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I'd rather play somebody else. I'm saying there's more of a trap potential against a terrible team in week 1 than week 14, week 15.
Right. And I say I would rather play a team that I got a significantly more talented roster week 1, get the season off right. The Eagles are subscribing to less is more preparation for the season. Then let me just sneak out of there with a win because we're just flat out better than they are.
Well, I'd might be
doing that than playing a team who's got more talent than the Eagles do.
I agree with you, but that might be and what if that happens, Jody? What if they sneak out of Detroit with a 21-20 win? People are going to be upset by that. It's going to be a win. It's great. You get out of there.
Wipe the sweat off your brow and move on.
Yeah,
that's
the way that you have to handle. People are going to be upset about that if that's the way it shakes out. They're going to be very upset by it.
Yeah, but I'd rather have that 21-20 win over Detroit than that 21-20
I'd
loss
rather
to
win.
Indianapolis if that were your first round.
I'd rather
opening
win.
game.
I'm just saying the spot is more difficult for the Detroit Lions in week 1. Not that I'd rather play somebody else. It's more difficult against a bad team early in the season, and especially in the home opener. Everybody gets fired up. That might be the only game Lions fans are fired up for, the home opener.
Well,
That might be it.
What did I plan? Thank you. I don't
No,
even know.
by Thanksgiving, they're always done. There's always 40,000 people there. They want to go to freaking Thanksgiving dinner.
All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your Mac Birds 365 today. We've got a pair of Jeffs coming your way. First up is our pal Jeff Kerr from CBSSports.com. A little bit later is Jeff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com. So we've got two good Jeffs joining us today. Kerr is next here on Birds 365.